You are welcome once again to COLONIALISM, Treasury of Excellent Knowledge. Today being Saturday, 9th of January 2021. Greeting from me from Valencia City, and greeting most especially in the name of Jesus the Christ, the Anointed One, the one anointed, the governor of the universe, God in form of humanity, the owner of all creatures, including human beings that exist, the everlasting richest, Jesus Christ. On his behalf, I greet you once again, and good morning from Valencia City. I think it is still morning. Yes, it is still morning. Good morning from Valencia City. Good afternoon, good night, or good evening, depending on where you are residing and where you will be coming across this video. From Valencia City right now, it is 11:19 a.m., 11:19 minutes after 11 in the morning. From Valencia City of Spain, I am your humble servant, Evangelist Collins. I want to talk on the part 3 of Christianity versus religions and colonization in Africa. So this is about how African histories, African cultures, African education system were altered from their originality to falsification, and by the colonists, by religious colonists, by political colonists, and educational colonists, the political colonists, and the religious colonists, the military colonists, which were led by the Romans and by other part of Europeans, by the Romans, by the Britain, by the French, then by the Spaniards, this Spain where I live. Their ancestors also were part of the colonization from different parts of Europe, invading Africa with their colonial cultural history, with their colonial educations, with their colonial religions, and the colonial religion being led by the Romans and also supported by the Britons and the rest of the colonial European entities in Africa. And all these people were not actually Christians, and it has been a generational matter, and all those who are involved into all this colonialism of different forms are not actually Christians, and what they practice is not Christianity. Even the Catholicism they introduced to Africa is not Christianity. So it is about further clarification regarding the notion of many Africans that Christianity is the problem of Africa. Some of them call it religion being the problem of Africa, but being unable to differentiate between Christianity and religions. And most Africans cannot even differentiate between politics and religions and Christianity. Most Africans cannot differentiate between political colonization, cultural colonization, satanic power, demonic power colonization, and they cannot differentiate all these things from Christianity. However, there are colonial Christianities, those who fraudulently and for their selfish interest come in the form of Christians and Christian leaders, Christian preachers, and whatever, using the name of Christ, even using the Bible, and giving a different interpretation and indoctrinating people with alternative doctrines, with human and devilish doctrines, using the same Bible to back it up, just the same way the Satan did to Eve and many other people in the biblical history from the Old Testament we hear between true prophets and false prophets. So these things had ever been in existence even before the political and worldwide colonization as championed by the Europeans. It is not a new thing, and it is very beneficial to we the Africans if we actually learn and understand what the realities of life and what the realities of fellowship is all about, and also to acquire the knowledge for defense so that we will not continue to be deceived, as I've made the part 1, part 2 on this topic, and for further clarification I have made various videos regarding Christian teachings as they are now numerous in my YouTube channel, and I will try by the grace of God to begin to channel some of the old teachings, channeling them through Facebook Live. I will be recording them through Facebook Live little by little, then I'll be presenting them on Facebook. And more so while I'll be making some other teachings, at times I will be available both on YouTube and on Facebook at the same time. May God bless you for listening. So there is an African woman, and I believe who is regarded as a member of the dungeon called Nigeria. I don't know whether she's actually a Nigerian or whatever, but she is accurate with her analysis and with her discovery regarding how African history was altered, African culture, some of the African cultures being altered by the colonists and influencing Africans with religions which are not Christianity, as spearheaded by the Romans and supported by the rest of the Europeans, including the French, including the British, then the rest of them, the Spaniards, and the rest of them who invaded Africa and colonized Africa. So from here, we get further information from the informations I have delivered on this topic and the previous topic which I've been dealing with. May God bless you for listening as I'm about to play the video I'm talking about. It will be around 17 minutes video. Then after the end of the video, either sometimes I will be breaking it to give brief analysis, or at the end of the video, I will round up.
Siempre quise ser un verdadero pianista, así que descargué esta aplicación llamada Simple Piano. Hi, welcome back to another episode of my Sankofa Pan-African series. Let's take off from the question that I raised in the last episode. Why the grand attempt to manipulate or distort history? Well, the answer to this question, raised by people like John Henry Clark, who I mentioned in the last episode, is not far-fetched. It was done to justify slave trade and colonization. In order to justify these dastardly acts, Europe needed to fabricate a history which emphasized its presumed superiority and minimized the contributions of all other groups of people. The easiest way to justify slavery and colonization was through the fabrication of a history that glorified the role of the white race as the only race which had the ability to civilize the world. To do so, they had to deny the roles of all other people, and in the process, they dehumanized them. When and how did this falsehood gain ground? Thankfully, there are a few historians who have shed light on these questions. Alongside John Henry Clark and others founded, this continent and so on. So I'll return to some of these so-called explorers at a later date. Now, these were the people who helped lay the foundation for Europe to colonize the world. One irony of this era in European history should strike us today because it is being played out before our very eyes. The same European countries that were so broke and were made prosperous mainly because of the proceeds got by colonizing and pillaging other parts of the world are so self-righteous now about keeping people from those same continents out of Europe. Anyway, back to the 15th and 16th century. It was the same period when Europe needed to extend itself to Asia and Africa that the claim about racial supremacy became institutionalized. These views about the superiority of the white race were reinforced by people like George William Frederick Hegel, one of the most celebrated Eurocentric philosophers, who described Africans as people who are underdeveloped and devoid of morality, religions, and political constitution. People like Hegel helped to justify Europe's enslavement and colonization of Africa because Europe's territorial ambition needed the deliberate policy to colonize minds by falsifying history. One of the ways that they did this was to put forward the lie that ancient Greece was the cradle of civilization. However, as Professor Ali Mazrui points out, the civilization of ancient Greece would not have been possible without the Egyptian civilization. This is because the Egyptian civilization was earlier than the Greek civilization. Rather, Greece borrowed heavily from the Egyptian civilization, even within current academic circles. When some Eurocentric scholars are forced to concede that the Greek and Roman civilization, which followed the Greek one, borrowed heavily from Egypt, they very quickly put forward another lie. They claim that ancient Egypt was completely isolated from the rest of the African continent, and so it should not be seen as an African civilization. Some even go so far as to try to claim that Egypt is an extension of the European continent. On the other hand, it is more historically accurate to trace the contributions of Black Africans to ancient Egypt than to link Europe's claim to the Greek or Roman civilizations. They challenge claims by Eurocentric historians who project the idea of Europe as the forerunner of world civilizations. Palmer and Colton prove that even the very word Europe did not exist during the Greek civilization, and it was hardly used by the Romans. As a matter of fact, the Romans considered all other Europeans as barbarians. Now, in addition to twisting history, some Europeans over time have also continued to present their culture as if it is superior to other cultures. It is one of the methods used to dominate, colonize, and dehumanize people. If we look closely at history, there are many examples of how this works. Like I said earlier, the Romans conquered most of their neighbors and used a system of cultural negation to keep them down. The Roman Empire pushed forward the idea that they were superior to pretty much all the nations that we now recognize example from Nigeria. In Nigeria, Lugard perfected a system which allowed external military and tax control to be operated by the British, while other aspects of rule were supposed to be left to local people and traditional rulers, who were then either coerced or forced into becoming puppets who served the interests of Britain. Another way through which the British colonized the minds of the countries that they ruled was through the imposition of the British educational system and the use of the English language. The British deliberately created a class system which was based on people's ability to ape, to imitate them. In other words, how well a person was able to speak the king or queen's English determined how civilized the person was. Imagine how much time our forefathers spent learning to act and sound British just so that they could be considered enlightened people. Meanwhile, this was done at the expense of their own oral and other cultural forms of education. I hope this proves that as Africans and people of African descent, we owe it to ourselves to actively engage in challenging biased histories about Africa. We must continue to conduct our own research and share them widely in the most accessible formats. So if Africa is to make any significant stride towards any major form of development, our history cannot remain exclusively within academic circles. Our children must be taught, people who do not have access to academic publications must know their history. And this is because, as Sheikh Antediop points out, even a superficial examination of the cultural situation of Africa challenges us to question the predominant history being pushed forward by the Western world. Because if we're to believe their account, their history, then we have to first believe that Africans have never been responsible for any contribution to the world. Not even the civilizations of empires like Ghana, Mali, Songhai, Ife, Nok, Zimbabwe, the Congo, to mention just a few. If we continue to allow ourselves the falsehood that Africans had no part in civilizing the world, it means we will then continue to depend on the so-called developed world for the solutions to all our problems. Now, this has become increasingly important when we look at the ascendance of blatantly racist regimes like the Trump presidency in the US, Putin's apparent new colonial aspirations,
twisted history to destroy African culture. That is the topic of this video. Then she is, that is hashtag 2, figure 2, Nacheki, hashtag African videos and African people. That is how to get her from YouTube. So may God bless you for listening. She has just explained a lot regarding how Africa is being invaded continuously, starting from centuries ago until recent days, being invaded with colonialism, religious colonization, religious colonialism, political colonialism, history colonialism, cultural colonialism, and for the interest of the colonists and for the detriment of the integrity of Africans, and some people use as African stooges to be serving the interest of the colonists, of which the African leaders as of today all remain the stooges of the foreign colonists, and they are the direct managers of this colonialism in Africa, which is also invested in African education, the colonial education, as this woman has just explained, which we have been hearing from different broadcasts, from my own broadcast and the broadcast made by others about colonial education. So we Africans cannot actually understand our history as long as we keep on depending on colonial history, because it is the foreigners, the invaders, the colonists that write what we believe and have accepted to be our history. Our belief system, they authored everything they authored only to continue colonizing us. So from here we know that it is not only about religious colonization, and more so, this is not what Christianity stands for. Christianity stands for deliverance from all this colonization. As I've quoted, Jesus Christ said, the thief cometh not, but only to steal, to kill, and to destroy. But Jesus, he has come, and with Christianity, that the world and Africans, to be precise, may have life and life abundantly. Christianity is targeted at teaching people the realities of life and how to benefit from realities of life. That is what Christianity is all about. So whosoever that come in the name of a Christian or Christianity, or as a vicar of Christ or ambassador or representative of Christ of any form, but do not promote the well-being of the people and do not speak the truth and stand for the truth, the person is not practicing Christianity for real, but disguising himself as a practitioner of Christianity while the person is a colonist, as we know that many people come in the guise of Pentecostal Christians while colonizing people. Jesus Christ is against it, and that is the reason when he went into the temple during the days, he saw people threatened for their selfish interest in the temple. He scattered their stuffs, letting them know that that is not the purpose for that. He was always challenging to the Pharisees, who were the religious colonists of those days in Israel, Israel being the leading nation regarding Christianity and religions, which is exemplified by Judaism and other religions. However, we see colonial religions manifesting from different areas, and for world colonization from the Europeans, and now it is more obvious that Christianity is not actually a religion, and religions are not actually Christianity. And the Christianity, as people regard, to be the African problem is not actually the African problem, but the African solution. Rather, counterfeit Christianity, colonial Christianities, and religions are the problems, and the colonization of all sorts, colonization through history, through culture, colonization, political colonization, all economic warfare, economic colonization, and total feudalism of rulership. Total feudalism of rulership. Those who rule Africans, the African leaders themselves are the colonists. African leaders are the African indigenous colonists over us. So they are the part of the problem. They are the managers of this colonization of the problems meted upon the entirety of the Africans. Don't forget one key word this man mentioned here, the colonization of the mind. So the colonization is founded on the minds of the Africans, and we the Africans are the people responsible to delivering ourselves. The colonies can never for any reason help us, because they don't want us to come out of that mess. It is we are responsible. So keeping quiet and keep complaining without taking action will not help the situation. As the woman has advised, that is a wise advice, that all Africans are to engage into research and beginning to find out the truth. And we the Africans are responsible to re-establish our educational system, to re-establish our historical system, to re-establish our beneficial cultures, because there are also evil cultures while there are beneficial cultures in Africa. We are the people responsible to rebuilding ourselves. So we cannot just continue to complain, pointing hand and playing blame games. That should not help us for any reason. It is all about continuation of enlightening us. And Christianity, as I always say, is all about win-win, benefit and benefit, but there are prices to pay, and that prices are prices of righteousness, prices of uprightness, prices of modesty, decency, orderliness, holiness, and looking forward to becoming perfect, as God has commanded that He is perfect, and God is the only perfect being, but He expects that we should emulate Him in becoming perfect stage by stage. That is what Christianity is all about, because we humans are created in the image of God, and God expects us to live like Him, character-wise. May God bless you for listening. I remain your humble servant, Evangelist Collins Ihima, until you hear from me once again and very soon.